All right. We can just make a start while others join. So, welcome to our first Twitter space for the month of June. This Twitter space is something that we plan to do as a network, which is the Global Activist Network, just to have an informal discussion with changemakers, grassroots activists across the globe who are making a difference in their community through their work and particularly aim towards achieving the SDGs by 2030. So today I'm happy and excited to have Chidinma Ibemere on the space today. Chidinma is a fellow One UK community leader, and she's also an award-winning development professional who serves as the lead volunteer at Chidinma Ibemere Foundation, an organization focused on bridging the gaps of inequalities and inequities that exist in education through empowerment programs, scholarships, and advocacy. She has an MSc in education leadership and policy from the University of Bristol, UK, and is also committed to contributing her quota in advancing education for all. Like I said, Chidima and I are fellow CEOs on the one in One UK. So yeah, I'm excited to have her on the space today to talk about the theme of for Africa Day this year, which is building resilient systems for African education, basically. So welcome to the space, Chidima.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here. And thank you to everyone who joined.
Okay, so yeah, we have a late start already, so we can just kind of jump right into the conversation. So this year's Africa Day, which we just celebrated a couple of weeks back, had a theme which is Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century, building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong, quality, and relevant learning in Africa. So, as an African, a fellow African woman who finds herself in the UK and who has also done a lot of work within the education space back home in Nigeria, I couldn't have thought of anyone better for this discussion. So, yeah, happy to have you here. So let's jump right in. So my first question is, as an education activist or as an activist in general, what is your perception? What is your perception of the education system in Africa currently? You can narrow it down to Nigeria or just like your broad like knowledge of what's going on currently.
Thank you for the question. For me, I feel like the education system in Africa has a long way to go because the the situation with respect to quality, with respect to inclusion and access, you can see the gaps, in various dimensions. So I'll just say that we have a long way to go, and it's painful because we're in the 21st century, and one would think that at this point we shouldn't be discussing issues about inclusion, or we shouldn't be discussing issues about access, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So I'll just, I'm going to, I know I'm going to speak more from a place of passion. So bear with me in any way I try to express myself, but the fact that I served as a teacher makes it, more painful, seeing teachers not being given the support that they deserve, seeing children who have potential being left behind because education is expensive, and those who even can afford education may not necessarily have the right resources for them. I remember there was this student that was visually impaired, and it was really difficult to see her in the midst. Yes, I understand the whole idea of integration, but resources were not readily available to her to ensure that she enjoyed her education. So I'm saying this from my perspective as one who taught in a Nigerian school at some point, and as one who actually went to school from primary through secondary and then to the higher institution, that there's still so much to do. There's still so much. We haven't gotten there yet. The progress is slow. Um, it's we have not gotten there yet, to be very honest. And we need to address education as a matter of urgency if we really want the right people, if we want, citizens who can compete favorably on the global scale. We need to invest, we need to ensure that we close the gaps as quickly as possible. So that's my perception about education in Africa.
Thank you so much for that, and everything you say, I'm sure not just me but others on this space can sort of relate and agree with you on many levels. So my next question would be, how do you think African countries, that's including government institutions, private organizations, not for profits, and the whole civil society organizations, how can they collaborate to build resilient education systems in Africa?
So I think it's important to understand that when we talk about resilient education systems, we're talking about putting into consideration issues that may arise. So, for instance, we have the most recent about the COVID pandemic. We going forward, I feel even the international organizations are geared towards, championing for education systems that can withstand the shocks of pandemics, that can withstand the shocks of any form of trouble that may be a form of global emergency. So, it could also mean, creating systems that can withstand the shocks of terrorism or conflicts. We understand that in so many countries around the world, so many children do no longer have like access to education because of conflicts, because of the issues going on around them, and because of that, they've stopped going to school, and there's really no hope for them in the next few years. So the advocacy is, how do we ensure that we do not stop education because of what goes on around us? How do we ensure that we do not allow children miss out from, the grand scheme of things just because there is a shock? I feel like the best way we can do it is to ensure that we advocate for policies that are realistic to our environment. I did a course while at Uni of Bristol, and it was about education policy in a global context. And something that was really profound for me was that I find it really troubling that most countries are quick to borrow policies. You know, for instance, let me use the issue in the Middle East. So we know that Afghanistan has issues with they have a current issue on education, and if a country like Nigeria, maybe the northern part of the country where there's also similar, issue of terrorism going on, we may want to pick, the recommendations of those in Afghanistan without putting into context what goes on around us. So I think first off is ensuring that policies that are in existence are realistic. They match the existing situation in our context. We don't just go around borrowing policies because we feel, oh, if it worked for Afghanistan, if it worked for Sudan, it will work in Nigeria. Or if it works in the UK, it's definitely going to work in Nigeria. No, it's important to ensure that we advocate or we collaborate to ensure our policies for education are realistic, taking into consideration what are what is the track record of setbacks we've had towards children accessing education, what are the likely possibilities, or what's the projection? Are we envisaging, a climate situation, or are we envisaging a conflict? The idea is just to ensure that for whatever shock that may come in, we may not necessarily have it 100%, but there is an extent to which, help is provided to ensure that children don't miss out through it all. So I remember during the COVID pandemic, we schools were asked to close down, obviously because of transmission and all of that. But I realized that my school, which was a federal government funded school, had provisions like tech provisions, were giving access to um platforms that would enable us continue teaching. But I realized that access to or the availability of these resources does not necessarily translate to access. So these are the kind of things when you are saying if we are saying how do we partner to ensure that our systems are resilient, we must also put into consideration how many people are able to access what we have on ground. With that in mind, it will help people to, transform the way they, advocate for policies. It would also guide advocates to use evidence-based data in ensuring that what they are saying relates to their realities. So I think this is just the way we can partner to ensure resilience, ensuring that whatever thing we are advocating for, we are putting into consideration various forms of shocks that we've had, one, what we are likely to have, and what is exactly on ground. So it would help in framing the policies to, help every student everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you for the response, and I agree with evidence-based data as well, because I mean we live in a world currently where it is available, but as to the accessibility, sometimes it can be a challenge as well. So moving on, I'd like to shift the conversation to like a different angle. So I'm sure, I mean, as a Nigerian, you'll be familiar with the kidnapping of the 276 Chibok girls by the Boko Haram in 2014 in northern Nigeria.
Yeah.
So, on that topic, as to regarding the safety and security of girls. So, to what extent do you think insecurity threatens like the safety and security of girls in education and those who aspire to even pursue education?
I mean, I feel like insecurity does not just affect a set of demography in our communities. It cuts across everyone, but the idea is just who are those who are disproportionately affected. To be very honest, I have had the opportunity of visiting three internally displaced persons camps in northern Nigeria. I went there for outreach programs, teaching and basically sharing ideas on entrepreneurship and all of that. One thing I noticed is that in as much as we are there to offer short-term hope, right? When we leave, there is the uncertainty of what would happen to them. What next? Is this going to be their reality? And okay, if this is not going to be the reality, for how long am I supposed to be in this situation? And I don't even wish for any child to experience such pain, because first off, your dignity is reduced. You are stripped off of your dignity. Imagine being displaced. You are taken away from family. Some of them have lost their families. There's just a lot going on. So I would say for the young girls, there's just I feel like the pressure is more on them. The trauma is a lot, and we need to work hand in hand, to keep advocating that those who stay in internally displaced persons camps also deserve an opportunity to fulfill potential. They also deserve an opportunity at life again. I don't know how we can, continue to add our voices to this. But to be very honest, being that I've visited such spaces, I know that there is the trauma on them. So I wouldn't. There's also the issue of their mothers who who for instance, I remember a story of a girl, a woman who lost her husband, and she was literally left with her baby. And the baby she had, her own arm was, her left arm was cut off, by the insurgents, and she just has her baby. A new reality has set in, and I'm thinking, if that girl child grows up, what becomes of her? Like, the mother is already like a poster sign of her past, and if nothing is done to equip her mind with the right education, maybe, because I know there are NGOs who actually go to these IDPs to teach them, to sort of encourage them to live their best life. But I'm just saying, what if these people are not, they are not accessed, or the organizations no longer go back to them? What becomes of them? So my take in all of this is, girls are disproportionately affected. I would not disregard the fact that everyone is affected, but for the girl child, it's a lot on her, because it's, how do I put this? The girls are really not at the receiving end of, societal, how do what's the word now? The society does not necessarily have it so soft for the girl child. So being a victim of such situation would add to the problem. In Nigeria recently, girls who were affected by terrorism were handed over to become wives,
Yeah,
100 of them. Yeah. So you can see that the community tends to dictate for them, and that's why education systems that are resilient must be enforced to ensure that regardless of where they live, they are not left out. They are equipped with the right things, with the right thinking, with the right opportunities, and hopefully they bounce back and get integrated back into the society. It's really painful, but this is just the world we live in. But I believe that we can continue to add our voices to ensure that we change the narrative for good.
yeah, I heard about that, and I was actually very shocked that someone actually thought that the right way was to, instead of helping the girls, was to actually keep them away for marriage, which is actually preposterous in 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think maybe you may have touched on this a bit in your previous submission, but narrowing
yeah,
the conversation down to your country, Nigeria, what are some of the
yeah,
key challenges faced in the education system in terms of inclusivity, quality, and accessibility?
yeah. Like you mentioned, I know that I have touched on that, but I'm going to start with quality. I am always very amazed when people advocate relentlessly for what's it called, quality education, without considering the the need for teachers, to be compensated right. Because I feel strongly that there is no quality education without the teachers. The teachers are the center of it all. Um, my problem with the system in Nigeria is that it feels like teachers are second tier citizens. It's just, we just know that they're supposed to be there, they're supposed to teach the children. But to be very honest, quality education cannot thrive without you giving teachers opportunities to fulfill potential. And what does this mean? It means ensuring that teacher remuneration is done, if with a lot of factors considered. Because in Nigeria currently, there's the issue of the minimum wage, and I'm thinking, if we look at it from the private schools, how many private school teachers are even earning up to the minimum wage, the current minimum wage in Nigeria, but they are expected to give in their all. Teachers go to school in the morning, they set exams, they ensure that they also have families, they have burdens. But the little thing that you're supposed to do, which is, ensure that you reward them for the services they are rendering so that they can increase education outcomes, it becomes a Herculean task. So for quality, I just want to put it out that quality education cannot be achieved without teachers. Teachers are the foundation of it all. So when you treat your teachers well, you expect outcomes that are positive. So that's my take on quality. Then when it comes to accessibility, it's unfortunate, to be honest, that it feels education is a privilege and not a right, with the way things are going on in our society. And those who even have access to it may not necessarily um, be given the opportunities to be transformed psychologically and otherwise. Why am I saying this? I know some countries that their policies for education are still having the 2008 Millennium Development Goals. Like, we've finished with the MDGs, we are about to end the SDGs, but the policies that are active in the country for education still has, references to the MDGs. So when our curriculum or our policies are outdated, we don't expect a miracle to happen. We would continue recycling students who do not meet standards on the global scale. So access for me is ensuring that what is even supposed to be accessed is current, is evolving with the 21st century trend. So when you are saying things like, we want our curriculum to be standard, does your curriculum encourage creativity? Does your curriculum also have collaboration skills? There are things that you can't necessarily um teach your child just because if you're teaching biology, it's just going to be biology. No, we want people who are fit to stand out, on the global scale. So what is your curriculum like? You may say, the curriculum is available, it's accessible to all, every teacher can read through, every teacher must follow through, but the content of that curriculum, does it fit the 21st century? The content of your policy, is it supposed to stand as a working document for the 21st century? So that is my take on access. Then when it comes to inclusivity, I feel like there is now awareness, when it comes to ensuring that people are included in the whole situation of like the situation of children with special needs. I remember that when I was doing my project for my master's, I worked on strategies of teaching biology creatively in Southeast Nigeria. And one of the limitations, or when I was trying to do my reflexive journaling, I said I felt bad that I did not consider capturing the data from teachers who teach biology to special children. And I feel, as advocates, as education advocates, then as teachers, or people who are just interested in ensuring that education becomes better, I feel it's important that we begin to actively and consciously capture people with special needs, their teachers, the students themselves. We just need to capture their data because they are part of the population. So it's good to know how they how it's good to just include them, not for the sake of ticking off policy options, no, but because their experiences are also valid. So I think these are my points when it comes to Nigeria, although I know I spoke in parables, but to be honest, quality, we must focus on our teachers to to ensure that students' outcomes are achieved. It is non-negotiable. And when it comes to accessibility, ensure that even what is accessible is relevant to our times. And then inclusivity, we should always capture those in special needs because they are part of the population. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And about teachers, I'm not even sure it's only Nigeria. I think it's across the globe. For some reason, teachers are really underpaid and undervalued, and I think that is really sad because of
Yeah.
their massive contribution to the economy and to education as a whole. And about you comment your send comment about including children with special needs, and I think that is also something that is kind of lacking. I mean,
Yeah.
in my country, Ghana, I think it's only now that there are people beginning to include those kind of children or have those discussions and provide facilities for those kind of children. But at first, because I have an autistic brother, and even though he didn't grow up in Ghana, it's kind of I kind of had a feel of how it would have been if he did, and even people that I've heard their stories about some of the challenges that they have to go through in getting uh, an access to education or inclusive education, just like you've talked about. So we have a long way to go, like you said in the beginning, on so many of these issues. But yeah, thank you for that. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. So moving on, in 2017 and 2018, there about the one campaign in the UK and I think across Europe had this poverty success campaign. That's when I joined as a youth ambassador. And according to the statistics, over 130 million girls were out of school, and that is an enabler of poverty because like you mentioned, like the recurrent or the consequences as a result of girls being out of school will be getting them into marriage, which obviously is not the solution, but in subcultures and traditions as of now, that is kind of like, oh, a woman's place is in the kitchen or in their husband's house and stuff like that. So 130 million girls is, to me, is like twice the population of UK currently, which is alarming. And currently, according to the UNICEF, it says this statistic stands at 129 million. Which, I mean, we can celebrate the reduction, but that's still a lot of young girls whose future has been like robbed away because of lack of access to education. So, what do you think? What drastic measures must be taken to reduce these numbers, like to the barest minimum, or to reduce them, or to ensure that every girl child across the globe has access to education?
Thank you. I feel like it's important we begin to, aggressively address this whole issue of dehumanizing girls. Girls are not objects of societal fantasies or um people that we have rights over, people who don't necessarily have a say. I i have two sisters, so we're three. And to be honest, while growing up, it was really heartbreaking. People coming, I know they may have felt it was a good thing, but when you say in front of a young girl that, oh, you need a brother, your parents need a boy, or they will tell my parents to have a boy because the family needs a boy to continue. I feel it's it damages your self-esteem because, to be honest, at some point I was even asking God why I was not a boy. I feel because of how the society already feels they have the rights over the ambitions of girls. Sometimes education is like, oh, it's not necessary in some cultures. But when we begin to aggressively, I'm using the word aggressive because that's the only language at this point that certain communities must be spoken to in. So first off, I think it's important we establish that girls are not afterthoughts. They are humans, and girls' rights are actually human rights. No ifs, no buts. That is one. Secondly, I think another way that's important to actually cut these things is to support those voices who are even coming up to say, oh, in as much as I'm from a community that does not necessarily recognize education, but I'm here because I believe I can do this. I think to support them, to amplify their voices would also, ensure that the storytelling is relatable. When you tell certain people that there are girls who have never been to school, sometimes it's like fairy tale. It's not true. But when you use people's stories, real life stories, to add to your advocacy, to say, oh, we're in this community and they don't encourage education, but we've been able to see one person or two persons who are going to school regardless of what their community thinks, it would help to encourage other people to say, oh, if this person is doing it and she's doing it well, then there is a possibility for it. Another point would be ensuring that government implements, the monitoring systems across board at the federal, state, and local levels. You cannot be in your state capital as the president, or your country's capital as the president, and feel that education, you've allocated certain fundings for education, and then you don't even put people in place to monitor where the funds are going to. Because if you tell me education is 8% of your budget, and then at the end of the year, at the end of the UNICEF year, there is a statistics coming to me to say, oh, your country is having the highest number of out-of-school girls, then you shouldn't be investing in the first place. So when you are investing, ensure that there is a strict monitoring system that is put in place to ensure that across board, federal, state, and local levels, they ensure that girls are taken to school. I know it's easier said than done, but if we start with one community, the ripple effects can be, can go so far. um Progress can be slow, but it is achievable. That's one thing I believe with the whole education advocacy. We may not necessarily do it immediately because of culture, because of tradition, because of beliefs, but one community at a time. And I believe that we'll be able to change the world for good. So my extra points would be ensuring that a strict monitoring system is put in place, that if there is a school, if there is a budget for education, it means that you need people to be in school. And if it is about culture, there are ways to address situations like that. If it's about tradition or religion, we would use storytelling to say there are people who have been able to advance their life, advance opportunity, get opportunities because they accessed education. Your child can do this. It's just about getting the context for each community and then working with that context to create solutions. So that's my take on this question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I really agree with the monitoring system, not even just for education, but across all sectors, because I mean, accountability kind of sucks on the continent, and sometimes, not sometimes, most times, it's quite sad to see the embezzlement of funds and looting and all that. And at the end of the day, people still remain in poverty, abject poverty, even though today you hear that, oh, maybe IMF has given this country money to invest in this particular thing, or the World Bank partnered with this ministry to do this. I mean, the stories are endless, but yeah, so here we are. So thank you for that. Moving on, so as a Black educated woman and activist, how do you currently or in the future advocate for an accessible and quality education for young girls and Africans in general?
First of, I hope that educated people get the opportunity to be in places that matter. When someone who is educated is in a place of authority, it changes situation. But someone who is not educated cannot necessarily, advocate for what he has not experienced or what he feels he does not have a need for. So my wish is, I hope for a world, I hope for a Nigeria, I hope for an Africa where people in power understand the importance of education. That is one. Number two, I think it is also important that we understand that we are in this together. It's not the role of civil society organizations. It's not the role of international organizations basically to be the advocates. You can start from where you are. So let me give you a quick story. Some years ago, I think this was 2019, I decided I was going to um, mark the World Day Against Child Labor, June 12th. I was going to sell water in the community. So I took some of my friends and we went into the streets. I saw some people, some young girls, and they did not accept because they didn't understand my plan. So luckily for me, there was a young girl who agreed for me to help her make sales. She took me to the depot where I bought water, and we were going around the market. I had the bowl on my head, selling, screaming just about the same way, running after buses to make my sales. So after that, this was around 11 in the morning, and I remember after the whole thing, I asked her, I said, please, why are you not in school? She told me, oh, her parents are in the village, that her auntie told her she had to sell something to she had to sell something to get money for her school fees. So what I did, I told her, okay, no problem. I was going to get back to you. And since I already know the depot and you come there every time. So I gave her the money that was made, added some money to her, and told her I was going to get back to her. Now I posted about it on the internet, and luckily two people reached out to give me money to look for her and pay her fees. I went to the depot the following week, waited for her. So the lady in charge of the depot recognized me and she said, oh, that this auntie, thank you for coming back. I told her I was here to see Favor. So she said she has not seen Favor, but she has seen Favor's siblings. And I didn't want to raise any drama because this was not the story the young girl told me. Long story short, the siblings came and I showed her pictures of myself with Favor from the previous week. And they took me to their house. When I got to the house, from the door, I saw a man shouting at Favor in our native language, Igbo, saying, why didn't you go to school? So I thought it was all these lousy neighbors who used to look for trouble. Remember, she said her parents were in the village and she was working with her auntie. So I didn't even discuss this with the siblings. When I got into the house, the mother was coming out from the bathroom and the siblings were like, oh, this is the answer that helped Favor the previous week. The woman said, oh, thank you very much. Now, you won't believe what happened. Favor came out. As soon as she saw me, she ran back inside. What was the story? That apparently the man who was outside screaming was her father. He came in and was shocked that what's going on. I told him that I helped Favor to sell pure water the previous week and I've come to pay the school fees. The man burst out crying. He was like, he has paid her school fees. That what do I mean? So I showed him pictures that this is what happened the previous week. So what happens is every morning whenever he puts them gives them money to go to school, the mom tells them to go and make sales. She tells them to go and make sales in the market. This is like an hour trip, that the money that the father gave to her for business is not enough. Now, why did I say this story? People have access to these opportunities, but because they're in spaces that don't know the relevance of what education is, that's why they will think it is unnecessary. So it's important that we as people, whenever you see a young child who is supposed to be in school, if you can help, you don't know if you're saving that child from some form of labor or some form of trauma, or you don't know what you can do. Don't look at it as it's not my business. It is your business, because in the long run, if something happens to Favor tomorrow, everybody gets to gather around to maybe pay for burial fees or something. You will still contribute in one way or the other. So when you are in a space where you can help, don't make it about the government. You can do something from your end. And I'm so happy that I was able to be the help Favor needed from her mother. Although the mother reached out later to apologize, and I had to take Favor that day back to school with the father, and some form of monitoring was done. Now Favor has finished secondary school and she's really doing well. The last time I spoke with the father, he's always reaching out. That's the amazing thing. So don't make it about the government. Don't make it about civil society organizations. Do something from your end. public schools are, cheap to an extent. If you have little money, just pay. You'll be shocked that £5 or 2,000 naira or 3,000 naira or 2,000 CDs is difficult for someone who is from a poor background. You can be that help for the person. I know these are not sustainable, but it would help in the meantime. That's I feel I've said a lot already, but these are my points. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's the point of you being here in this conversation. So, it says you're the lead volunteer at Chidinma
Yeah.
Ibemere Foundation. So, could you talk through just briefly, like some of the
Okay.
maybe programs or maybe like favor some of the initiatives that you have undertaken in the past couple of years, and then yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So it actually started out as an outreach outfit in 2017, January. The idea at the beginning was to go to schools and talk to the young girls on self-development. That because I felt strongly that formal education would be better achieved when we integrate soft skills. So that was the idea for me at the beginning until it evolved into a foundation. Gratefully, we've been able to host over 40 outreach activities in various cities across the different education levels. I think one of the or two of the major things we've been able to do would be, visiting IDP camps and teaching skills development, baking, um, disinfectant production, and also supporting some families with, finance to just help disrupt the cycle of poverty. Then, during the pandemic, one of the major things we did was to support 22 students, through donations, gifts, and all that. We were able to support 22 students in schools in Southeast Nigeria to retain them in school because we found out that economic situation was difficult and a lot of families did not recover from the shock of the pandemic. So this was just our contribution to the community, supporting 22 students, retaining them in school. And we had a break because I came to the UK, but thankfully by August this year, we are having a bigger, we're planning something very big by God's grace. So I'll share more about that later. But for now, we just try to support since last year or since 2022 October. What the foundation has been doing has been to support organizations who are actually doing the work, through donations, financial donations to ensure that, we're not just, in as much as we're not doing any projects per se, but we're supporting others who are doing something. And yeah, that's where we're at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, let us know when it's time for the, the big project, and then yeah,
No
we
problem.
support in one way or the other as much as we can. So,
Thank you.
in light of the recently celebrated Africa Day on the 25th May, as an African, what is your vision for Africa in terms of not just education but development across all sectors?
I think I want an Africa that is independent, that can stand alone. I look forward to the point where we don't need to be worried if the UK slashes the the ODA, right? We don't need to be worried if they slash it from zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.1 because we're sufficient. That's the kind of Africa I look forward to. An independent a continent independent in the sense that we're able to meet our needs with the available resources we have, right? I look forward to an Africa that is a major global player, a major contributor. I can't wait. I just want an Africa that is free from troubles, free from troubles, free from and just a peaceful, happy Africa. It's a long dream or it's an ambitious dream, but This is my hope, where people don't have to leave to understand what greener pasture is, but where people remain and water what is around them, because it would definitely flourish. Yeah, that's my dream for Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. And as to being independent, I totally agree. And also
Yeah,
being part of or being at the seat of the table of where most of these decisions that affect us are being taken. For instance, the AU, which is the
yeah,
African Union, being added to the G20. So
yeah,
which is progress in that sense, but
yeah,
obviously
true.
like we're looking forward to becoming more without much reliance on foreign aid.
Foreign aid. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you. Now to
Thank
the
you.
very last question. So as we come to the end of this session, if you have
Mm,
any questions, you can raise your hand and then we would ask, and you can ask Chidima, or you can just type it in there and then I'll read it and she can answer. So, in a few words, just to sum
yeah.
up, what is your message to world leaders and specifically African leaders? Do you envisage progress at all in Africa in the coming years?
Yes, I do. I envisage, I have hope. I have hope. My hope is active for Africa. And I know that, like I always say, it may be slow. It may not be at the rate we all want it, but I believe that if we keep pressing in, it will be great. We saw the beautiful situation in Senegal with the current president. We know that for you to stand alone, for you to stand up for yourself, would come with a lot of pressure. But if you're focused, if you know that this is what I want for my country, because it begins with the country first before it multiplies across the continent. So if a country decides that we're going to stand for the right things, we're going to ensure that voting processes are free and fair, because that's where the issue is. Most African leaders want to impose themselves on the people that they claim they are there to serve. When you impose yourself on me, I would definitely resist. I will resist you, of course, but allowing the choice of the people to prosper, I think that's something that I really look forward to, and I hope that African leaders understand this. We saying that we want younger people in power is not necessarily disregarding the older generation, but then we're looking at it from a place of active service. You can't be 70, you can't be 80, 90, and then you want to remain in power. Your productive years have passed away. Give room for younger people to take over, not necessarily from a place of disrespect, because I know as Africans, we are big on respect and honor, but from a place of intergenerational collaboration, I think that would make us prosper the more. Then also understanding that Africans are humans, we're not statistics, we're not we're not UNICEF data. We are actually humans. And when you treat us as humans, it will reflect in the kind of policies you enact, it will reflect in the kind of policies you implement. So that is for African leaders. And then for world leaders, I really think that um, we need ourselves, basically. I understand the power positionality. Those in, the Western world would always want to rub it on the faces of the other side. Like, okay, we're the ones giving you funding and all of that. I feel it's important that when you are releasing funds, ensure that the need is met, basically. You don't just impose what you think. For instance, let me give an example. A funding organization or a funding nation may say, you know what, we're going to fund things on health. What if the country in question does not have issues, or they don't really have gaps in health? Why can't you make your funding be less restrictive? When you give me money for health and I don't need it for health, it's meaningless. So world leaders must understand that funding should also come with some flexibility. understand that at the other part of the divide, they are also humans. Continents are it's just the way the world is divided. There's power positionality, but when you are doing it, it should be power with and not power over. Don't impose, but do it in a form of collaboration where we can make the world a better place for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer. And yeah, definitely um our leaders really need to step up, and we as citizens also can contribute our quota towards the development. My kind of recent concern, and I think I raised this on our monthly session for Africa Day, about the problem of brain drain right now that's happening with a lot of African youths, leaving the continent for greener pastures. And obviously, you cannot blame them, because this is a case where everyone, especially as a young person, you want a place where you can flourish. You want a place where your hard work is rewarded, not a place that frustrates you to the extent that, you feel like you're not regarded or you're not respected. Your human rights are not respected. Like you said, education is supposed to be a human right, but in our part of the world, mostly it's seen as a privilege, which shouldn't be so. So there's so many, reasons as to why youth and the youth is leaving. But then I just look at it like from the other side, like as until when are our leaders going to sit up? Until when are we not going to demand for more? Because it looks like the continent is being drained, our countries are being drained of resources, and then you have all these problems there, and it's like nobody cares, and the leaders are not doing anything, and people are still living in abject poverty, and it's like it never really gets better. So until when will these issues actually still be in our faces, and it's like we are powerless and we can't really do much. So it's beyond education, but even though education is one of the most powerful access that you can give to your child, but it's kind of cut across, because it also, like, and we look at it from the economy angle, we look at it from the development progress as a continent. So thank you so much for your knowledge and sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate you being on this space with us this evening.
Thank you for the honor.
You're welcome. I don't. Do you have anything else to say before we open up for questions?
Okay, now.
All right. So, yeah, you've heard a lot from Chidinma this evening. So, if you have any questions, yeah, please raise your hand, and I'd invite you to ask Chidinma whilst we are still here. So, yeah, questions. Taiwo, do you have any questions? Phoebe? Okay. Yes, Sita, go ahead.
Hi, Chidima. Hi, Gan. Thank you so much. This is a really interesting discussion. I thought it was very insightful, especially in terms of the responsibility of government and also communities. My question is really centered around culture, because I'm from a country where education is quite recent. I mean, for example, like we were colonized by the Anglo-Egyptian government, and Southern Sudanese were not allowed to go to school, only if you were from certain families. So if you were like a chief family, etc. So education is still something that's quite new to my community, maybe in the last 2, 3 generations. And so we have this culture particularly in my tribe. So we're like a nomadic kind of semi-nomadic tribe. We move around with cattle, so we're cattle keepers. So we have this culture of like sustaining ourselves and basically focusing on taking care of the homestead and taking care of cattle, and that's basically our wealth. That's the center of our entire lives. So we have a culture whereby a lot of not only just families, they prefer for their boys to go to school if they want their boys to go to school, because not all the sons will go to school, but you also have a case where a lot of families will hold back girls from going to school because they see it like they're going to lose wealth because the girl needs to get married and that kind of stuff and take care of the home. And that again has resulted in a culture whereby we do fund certain girls. So we do fund girls and families. Like myself personally have helped my niece go to university and things like that. Then you have this idea that, well, they have this idea then, I don't want to get too old, right? So the girls are like, I don't want to get too old. I don't want to miss, the marriage train. I don't want to go through that kind of challenge. So my question is, how do we transform the cultural mindset, not just for parents or wider communities, but also for girls who are already being supported and who are given the opportunity? Some of them may be on scholarships, but then you have men coming to try and marry them. Like there's one really good school in Lake State in South Sudan where they've literally made agreements with parents. So like girls are not allowed to be taken out of school because they know for a fact that if they go on holiday, sometimes they get married off or they get eloped and that kind of stuff. So my question really is centered around, given this context, how do we transform the culture, especially for young girls in my country, South Sudan, whereby they'll be inspired to stay in school rather than say, you know what, I've done my primary school, I'm educated already, I'm ready to move on from this. That's kind of what my question is centered around.
Okay, thank you so much, Sita. Sita is an amazing individual, so thank you for joining. I know that, like I said earlier, the concept of culture is tricky, and of course, culture is the way of life, but we just need to apply, strategies. And one of the ways I recommend would be use it. I believe strongly that, for the girls that have been supported, there would still be a percentage of them who are working, hard to fulfill potential, and then who believe strongly that what has been given to them would flourish or would not be made to go to waste. I think when you want to advocate, it's important to use such beneficiaries to tell the stories. You may not have the impact immediately, but using the stories of someone they can relate to inspire them to say, you know what, everything is possible. You can have a good marriage, you can also be educated. Education is not a barrier to having a fulfilling life. It's actually enhances it. So using the stories or using the people who have benefited from education from that community to tell the stories, to go back home to tell them what they have become, would open up channels of conversation. Um, I remember there was a time I went to a community, and it was, I think I posted about it, and the community engages in female genital mutilation, but their joy is that they no longer use the blade. They use hot water, to make the clitoris disappear. And when I asked them, why are you still doing this? One of the women said, oh, we're doing it because we don't want our daughters to be promiscuous. And I said to them, are there no people in the community who have been mutilated that are promiscuous? Using their situation to ask them questions, to open their minds to conversation, it does a trick. And gratefully, one pregnant lady stood up and said in the local language that she was not going to allow her daughter to be mutilated no matter what, that she now has an understanding of this. So my conclusion would be, you need to understand that you have to understand, of course, that culture is tricky and people would go to any lengths to preserve culture because it is what represents their identity. However, we can use the stories of those who have benefited from education to amplify their voices. Don't speak on their behalf. Let them be at the forefront of of championing the importance of education. And it may not necessarily have like a general effect on everyone, but one person is enough to change the narrative. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful.
Thank you, Sita.
Thank you so much, Chidinma, for that answer. And we have another question here from Taiwo. He says, in your experience, what are some of the practical ways young people can leverage available resources and opportunities to simultaneously pursue academic qualifications and develop essential skills for the 21st century job market? I love this question. So over to you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much for asking. To be honest, I recognize that all fingers are not equal. What may be accessible to A may not necessarily be available to B. So it's important to start with what you have. If you have access to the internet, it's an open space for you to explore. What are those things that you are passionate about? Begin to learn them for free. When you are on the internet, instead of scrolling endlessly on social media platforms, you can actually encourage yourself to say, okay, I am going to do this part. I'm going to learn, something on public speaking. I'm going to learn how to, use in shorts, just something, task yourself. For me, I am currently on a course by GPE, Global Partnership for Education. They have this course on system transformation for education, and I have started it. I have finished session 1, and I'm telling myself there are 5 sessions. It's quite long, but I'm happy that I finished session 1. I'm still going for session 2 by next week, and I must make sure I finish it. I've given myself a timeline. I will not say, oh, because I have a master's in education leadership and policy, because of that, I feel I've achieved it all. No, I still task myself to say, this is something you are going to learn. This is something you need to, have a knowledge of, even if you don't have so much, but just a little. You are doing yourself a great honor by improving yourself. So start with what you have. You can't access everything because it's not so possible, but with what you have, task yourself and prioritize, what exactly do I want to learn, what do I want to be better at, then you just go for it. Then another thing would be engage in your local space. You cannot say you want to be like a founder without serving another organization. You must learn how to serve in order to lead. So my advice would be volunteer for opportunities. It's not always about the money. How much am I going to be given? Sometimes your friends may have projects that they are running. Just be there to support them. Even if it means sharing flyers, giving them words of encouragement, or even physically being present, it would help in the grand scheme of things. When I became a one champion for Nigeria, it was just the little things I did that summed up my essays. Oh, I've joined in this outreach activity. I've also hosted this outreach activity. These are pictures. And these were the things that helped my application. And I was grateful that I served as a one champion in Nigeria for 2 years. So start with what you have. Be willing to learn, be willing to improve yourself, because you are your own ambassador. You need to enjoy what you are doing, but there has to be knowledge. It may not necessarily be so overwhelming, but just know something and be good at it. Basically, I feel that you would be a citizen that is fit for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you so much about your points that you made. I totally agree as well. Like most of the time, people think that, oh, I've been to school, have a bachelor's, I have a master's, so that's it. But education is a never-ending journey. It's not just within the 4 walls of the classroom, and just like you said in your previous submission, like there's the internet, there's so many available resources, and you mentioned volunteer. Like I've gotten so many opportunities out of just volunteering and spaces that I wouldn't have been in if not for that. And I think that's also so important that apart from we advocating for people getting in the classroom and getting the education or actually getting the accessibility and quality education, we also need to champion that bit about, okay, so now that you have the degree, so what next? What can you add value to? Maybe it may not be a paid job, but what can you do within your local community? What can you like do to help, whatever organization? What can you do with the knowledge that you've acquired, so that at the end of the day you have also something to show for, okay, like I have this degree, I also done this, I volunteered here, I helped this organization to go from this to that, I did that, all those kind of things is also very important in, this 21st century that we currently, or this current world that we find ourselves in. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any more questions for Chidinma? While we wait, I will just one question or something popped up in my mind. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. So there's this kind of, anytime I've seen people, sometimes people bring up stories of, graduate unemployment is also a thing in Africa, and not just Africa, but across the globe. Let's not lie, COVID kind of set us years back, and after COVID, it's been one thing to the other, one kind of global crisis, and in one way or the other it affects we, the young people who are currently in our prime and pursuing opportunities and all that. So graduate unemployment is a thing, and every time I've seen stories of people maybe share their ordeals in finding jobs, not just in Africa but even here in the UK and in other developed countries. And sometimes you see comments and people say, oh, education is a scam, education is a scam. And it kind of breaks my heart when people say that education is a scam. I'm like, can you clarify which part of it education is a scam? Because we live in a very globally competitive world where, everybody is competing for probably the same opportunities that you are competing for. So at the end of the day, like, what is the extra thing that you bring to the table? So as an education activist, that phrase or that thing, education is a scam, or school is a scam, what do you think of those kind of comments?
I feel it reflects poorly of their approach into life. To be honest, most people who actually say education is a scam are people who maybe things they were pursuing did not get fulfilled, or they didn't get to achieve what they were pursuing. So it's just like, oh, it's a statement, education is a scam. Education is not a scam. It actually gives you opportunity to sit with people that matter. It gives you a leverage that someone who is uneducated can never have. What I always advise to people, I know especially for those who are in this part of the world, trying to get jobs it can be a task on its own. Like, it can be a job on its own to get a job. But for every failure, if you have the opportunity to be interviewed, always ask for feedbacks, because it helps to improve your next opportunity. So always ask for feedbacks. What went wrong? What did I not say well? And most organizations are kind to actually give you feedback, especially when you get to that interview level. Whatever has been given to you is just an opportunity for you to prepare better for the next, platform. It can be discouraging when you are applying and you're not getting it, and it feels like, oh, are you not doing the right things? Even when you have done everything you're supposed to do. This is where encouraging yourself comes to play. You need to keep hope alive and ensure that your worth and your essence of life is not tied to your job. You need to separate your life from, I know it can be hard, but when you make a job the essence of why you are alive, then if you don't get it, you become depressed. So be kind to yourself by separating yourself from the equation. If you apply and it doesn't work, yes, it can hurt. If you want to cry, cry, but don't make it look like you've idolized the situation because of your mental health. And when you are down, you can't even be in the right space to, want to push on. So my take would be kind to yourself, keep trying, keep hoping, keep doing what you're supposed to do part-time, because they say opportunity meets those who are prepared. If you're not prepared, you can lose out from, a great deal. just keep pushing, keep being positive. One day, your efforts will actually become, rewarded with the job that you so desire. But don't be like people who say education is a scam. Some people would always say, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, he was a dropout. Ask yourself, which school did he drop out from? Harvard. It was not a community secondary school in your village. He dropped out from Harvard, meaning that for him to have even gotten into Harvard, it was among top percent of, people who applied. For him to have gotten in shows that he had resources to sustain himself through Harvard. Have you gone through school fees of Harvard for you to know that dropping out from Harvard was a choice, not that it was circumstances? No. So when you hear people saying, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, this or this person dropped out and is doing well, ask yourself, the little time he spent in Harvard, the access to networks, the access to opportunities, the access to education he was able to embrace in that little period he was at Harvard. Some people who went to a common state school may never get that opportunity. So don't always look at it from the place of, oh, he's a dropout and he was able to make it. Look at the antecedents before the dropout situation, then make the right choices of words. That's my take on, the whole thing. Education is not a scam.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I totally agree. I think sometimes, yeah, just like you're saying, it's very important to separate your job or your job titles from yourself as a person, because it's when people like make these things idols in their life. Oh, like this job that I'm applying, I have to get it, or I have to get here, I have to do this. And then it becomes an idol for you. So then when that disappointment comes in, you don't get it, or you get that unfortunately email, then it becomes like a depression sort of thing for you. And like you said, it's okay to feel down. You're human, you have emotions, but you ask for feedback, you pick yourself up and you move on. It's all just about moving on. It can be easier said than that, like it's definitely easier said than done, but you just need to develop that kind of resilience and like thick skin and like continue like knocking on doors, and definitely the right one for you will open. But that doesn't invalidate your educational experience. Like it's kind of, it's actually so wrong to say your whole education is a scam just because of maybe the tough global scene, like in the job market scene is tough. So it invalidates your education experience. That is quite unfortunate. Like when people say that, but then that shouldn't be our realities, especially as young people, as change makers, as activists who want to change the world or who want to make a difference and change the mindset of people towards education. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Chidinma? I think we've got a bit over our scheduled time, but then I'm sure Chidinma doesn't mind if, let's say, there's any last question for her to wrap up the session today. Okay. If not, then on behalf of the Global Activist Network, I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Chidinma, for sparing this Thursday evening and coming to share your knowledge with us and your insight as well. We are really grateful to have you here and to share your insights with us, and to answer questions as well and to interact with us. So I would like to say a very big thank you for your time, your invaluable time and knowledge, of course. So yeah, any comments or anything else you'd like to say to wrap up the session, please feel free to do
Yeah.
so.
Okay, thank you. I want to say thank you to you, Gertrude and Lemona, for the opportunity to be on this great platform. I remember when I saw you last time, I was like, I need to work hard. I need to work hard to be on this platform. But it happened earlier than I imagined. So thank you. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined. Sita, You're amazing. I love you already. Thank you to my sister Chibuzo. You are so grateful. You are so amazing. Of course, you're my sister. Then my mom and dad are listening. So thank you to my mom and dad and to my two sisters, Chinere and Onye. Thank you so much, Taiwo. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you to every other person who joined but has left. I'm so grateful, and I hope that we continue to keep pushing so we see the world that we all deserve to live in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's so cute. Like parents are listening. That's so like nice. So yeah, thank you as well. And yeah, thank you to everyone who joined our space. We have this space at maximum twice a month, and we like to bring in change makers like Chidinma and others who are doing amazing work within um towards the SDGs or within the international development space. So it would be great to have you join us for our next space in the coming weeks. So we'll really be grateful if you could follow us on here on our Twitter page at Gant Leadership. We are also on Instagram at Gant Leadership, and we are on Facebook and LinkedIn as Global Activist Network. And yeah, we'll be happy to have you to be a member and to join us for our upcoming sessions and programs. So that's the end of our space today. Have a very good evening and see you soon on our next Twitter space.